I am delighted to be back at Anderson. I am an Anderson grad and a UCLA undergrad, though it's been a minute. So my career after grad school for the past, couple of decades, I've been a middle market CFO and a startup CFO. And so I speak numbers. I have also been on the board of an organization called Women Founders Network, which is a nonprofit board. And every year we have an annual fast pitch competition, which I am going to get back to in a moment. So in any given year, I see and review about 100 pitch decks. And unfortunately, many of those, 90 of those, are compressed in about 3 weeks. So I've seen a lot of pitch decks. I've seen what works and what doesn't resonate quite so well. So I will try to share that with you. That is also my bias. I think in terms of pitch deck. I think in terms of investor deck. So think about that as you're putting together your forecast or your materials. Who is my audience? Because if you do a high level 5 to 10 minute pitch deck in some of the Anderson classes, your professors are going to go, where's the rest of it? They're going to want to see where's the detail. So reach out to your professors or your audience and figure out who they are. And how much time do I have? So if you're giving a pitch, whether it's in a class or in front of an investor, figure out how much time you have, because that will determine how much time you get to talk. And in front of an investor group, usually half talk, half questions is give or take the right ratio. So if you got 20 minutes, it means you can only pitch for 10. And if your instructor says you can only pitch for 8, you can only pitch for 5, that's all you get. And you can't just start talking faster and hope that you can get through as many slides as you possibly can in that shorter period of time. No, you have to figure out, what are my most important concepts? What do I really need to communicate, given that I only have 7 minutes or 10 minutes or 5 minutes? So try to get as much information on who your audience is, and that will help you define how much information you can include on your pitch. So if you Google, what are the 10 top slides every pitch deck must have, you will get something that includes these 10 topics. And today, we are not going to cover those 10 topics. We are going to cover 1.5. We are going to cover financials and metrics and a little bit about market size. So we are not going to cover the whole thing, but I'm sure there's other programs here that go into covering the rest. I mentioned that I'm part of Women Founders Network, and this is your lucky week because our big final pitch event is next Tuesday. And if you want to sign up to attend, it is here on campus. What are the odds? We're going to have about 275 people attending, give or take. There will be wine and appetizers, and you can use this discount code on our website and attend in person, or there's also a way to attend virtually. We will have our top 10 finalists, 5 of them tech, 5 of them consumer, and we started with 185 applicants and top 10. So you will be able to see somebody get up and only have 5 minutes, and they will cover these topics. So it's a fun experience, and it's watching someone who is actually out there raising money from investors or trying to win our money. The charity gives away $55,000 this year in cash prizes. So again, we are going to focus on financials and metrics, and also talk a little bit about market size. So any of you here have an accounting background, work in any finance, when you're at a company that exists and you have to do a forecast or a budget, you pretty much have to do every year, right? Where do you start?
Target setting, strategic planning.
Pardon?
Strategic planning and target setting.
Right. Where would you start?
We'd start with like actuals.
There you go.
Base.
You have history. You can look at last year's results and the year before and say, well, we're going to do better over here. We lost this customer, whatever it is. You have some history that you can go to. If you're a startup, you've got this much history. You've got a great idea. You're pre-revenue, or I'm going to assume you're pre-revenue, and you can't just go back to last year, add 10 or 20% and hope it all works. So that makes it a different exercise as to where you start. And the answer is you want to do both a top-down and bottom-up approach to the financial forecast. So what I mean by top-down is you want to look at your market. How big is your market? Hopefully big, right? And hopefully growing. So you would get very familiar with the terms TAM, SAM, and SOM. And TAM, or total addressable market, and mostly people refer to it as TAM, is the big giant market that you're looking at and that you can be part of. So let's think about Tesla, say 10 years ago. They were about to launch the Model S, I think it was. And maybe you could argue, well, their TAM was the automotive industry, right? You're going to sell a car. And then as you look at that, you want to keep narrowing it down until you get to your SOM, which really attracts your customer and defines your customer. But in between them, now the automotive industry, that includes buses and semis, and Elon Musk wasn't going after that, right? He was going to create passenger cars. So you could argue that his SAM was passenger cars. But now think about it, you still have to narrow your focus to those customers that are going to be interested in your product. And in this case, you could say, wow, yeah, Anne, it was the electric vehicle market. This is 10 years ago. Anybody remember what was available 10 years ago? Passenger cars that were fully electric? Oh, come on. Chevy, and the Nissan Leaf. There you go. How do those compare exactly to, a Model S? So you got these small, $30,000 runabout cars. They had something like a 40-mile range. And he's launching, the beginning price on the S was $100 million. They really weren't going to be able to drive it off the lot for less than $125. So as you look at that market, passenger cars, you can say, well, he was going after electric. He was going after luxury. As people who are buying a Nissan Leaf, that might not be the market that can shell out $125K for a car, and probably people who are really interested in tech. So you can take that market and really start to whittle it down into your SOM, into what customers within this big market actually genuinely speak to my product or my service or what I'm trying to launch. Does that make sense? So you start big and you whittle it down and you get very, very specific. Because when you get down to your SOM, it's not going to be, oh, I can just get 0.001% of that market. No, that is so narrowly defined that you're going to want to be able to get a noticeable chunk of that market. You're going to want to find people with attributes that specific that today you can get a noticeable share of that market. Okay, so to do that, you also had to define your target customers, right? So we talked about they have to have a reasonable bank account. They have to be wanting a luxury vehicle, and probably they really like tech, or maybe they just want whatever. Figure out what core attributes of my product match something that my customers truly value. So you start with a large market, you whittle it down to the segment, and then you whittle it down to your SOM, which serviceable, obtainable. Could they come up with any worse, description? A lot of people right now, instead of calling it the original, they just say share of market because. So that's your top-down approach in looking at.
Wait, right there. In the back.
Oh, okay, cool. Okay, and then the bottoms up. That is, so you're top down. I've got this huge multi-billion-dollar, market, and I'm going to narrow it down to something where I can actually get a meaningful percentage of it. But when you go bottoms up, you have to start with, how are you going to reach them? You're launching a brand and a product or an app or a software, whatever it is, you're pre-revenue, that's my assumption today, and probably, except for your direct family who are now barely wanting to hear about it, very few people know about your product. So that's where your marketing plan comes in. How many customers can you reach, and how are you going to reach them? So when you think about it, this is your marketing strategy, your ad strategy, social media. What are the tools that you have, or your co-founder, if you were me, it'd be my co-founder, has marketing skills that I don't, and how are you going to reach out to those people? Oh, I'm going to throw an event here at UCLA, and I'm going to hand out free whatever it is to get people to show up. And I'm going to buy Facebook ads, and I'm going to launch something in social media and start creating content and start creating a following. All of these things you have to think about, because it's not that different than your market, right? Because you're going to start with, how do I reach potential customers, and what's the biggest number I can reach? And hopefully it's kind of big, right? Because of all of these people in this room, imagine there was a whole lot more of them. Not everybody's going to really resonate with your product, right? So you'll start out with a large number, and then you'll bring it down to people who are like, yeah, that $100,000 electric car sounds pretty good to me. And then you have to get from that customer who is intrigued enough to go onto your website or show up at your event or do whatever they do, that they can then click on something and actually place an order, right? So when you look at conversion rate, your conversion rate is, how many people can you attract to the product, and how do you convert that to an order? So conversion rate is going to be an important metric in your business plan, because you're describing the total amount of people and then the people that you can actually convert to customers. Okay? All this marketing is not free. The event, you're handing out the freebies, the social media, the Facebook ads. One thing an investor for sure will want to know is your customer acquisition cost. So if in 6 months you spend however many dollars and you get this many customers, it's the dollars divided by the customers equals your customer acquisition cost, right? So we see a lot of business plans where they say, ooh, year one, I've got 500 customers. Year two, 10,000. Year three, 40,000. Marketing cost, marketing spend, 5,000. 10,000. And they're somehow magically getting up to 50,000 customers on $10,000 of marketing spend. So be realistic and think about, yes, some of it you will get for free. If you were launching WhatsApp and that was your app and that was your product, well, if you're going to use it, you can tell 10 other people, because otherwise you have nobody to text, right? So you'll get some organic growth and you can build some of that into your market. But even as charming as you are, you're going to run out of friends and people to tell. So you're going to have to constantly do marketing to pull in. Think about what that marketing looks like, and how are you going to launch your company, and how are you going to get people to understand what your product is and be intrigued enough to click on that button, put in their card, or pay for your product in some way. Now, the next thing is, and I don't know anything about what products you might be looking to launch, is we've given you a couple of ideas on how to get the number of customers, right? Take your market, you narrow it down, you take your advertising, you attract people, you narrow it down, and you've got your number of customers. To get that number of customers, yeah, you're going to have to make some assumptions. There's nothing locked in stone that says conversion rates are always 3%. So I get it. It's not, so there are going to be some leaps of faith here, right? But if you can get to a number of customers, a number of orders in a rational way, then you're getting really, really close to revenues. So you've got your customers, you've got your orders. What do you have to multiply that by? Revenues. Price. So you need to define at what price or prices will I be selling my product. So let's say you just think this is the greatest little black t-shirt on the world and you're willing to buy it online. So if I sell direct to customer, that's one price. But if I have to put it into a bunch of stores, well, they have to make a margin. So the price to me is something less, right? So direct to customer is one price because I'm getting your money and your money straight versus through a store. Or maybe it's actually even worse through a distributor and then a retailer in a physical product. So think about the different price levels that may occur if you're distributing through different channels. On the tech side, if you are going after, maybe you're launching something where you have a freemium model and a premium model. So you'll end up with a subscriber. Think about, how do I get the freemium customer and then how do I convert them to premium? And what are my, if you do it for 6 months, we'll lower the monthly to this, and whereas a month at a time, it's going to be slightly higher. So think about your pricing models and why there might be multiple different prices for the exact same product, depending on who your customer is and how they're getting it. Does that all make sense? Questions? It's easy, right? Piece of cake. So in putting these two approaches together, you ultimately end up with revenue. And again, you are going to have to take a couple of leaps of faith on how many customers I'm going to be able to attract, how many I'm going to be able to orders. That's all part of the process. Okay? So what you're going to end up with is my favorite Excel spreadsheet, right? You're going to have multiple types of customers, multiple distribution channels. You're going to have some customers that stay in the system for a while and then leave. And if you put that on a page and put it on a screen, people will leave. So what you are going to do is come up with some simple graphic ways of showing people where your company is going. It won't be this simple, but this is conceptually where you want to go. So first and foremost, make sure in your pitch deck you are clearly defining what your business model is and who is writing the check. So I've seen, this great educational app. We gamified it. It's fabulous. And don't you love it? And I get to the end of the pitch deck. And okay, is the school paying for it or are the students? They have very and different ways that you're going to approach that customer. So make sure that it is pretty darn blatant. Customer times price equals revenue. And this is the customer that's putting in their credit card or writing a check to pay for the service. How long should you put a forecast for? And 3 years is kind of the minimum. And you're thinking, I don't even have a product yet. What the heck, 3 years? Well, there's a reason for that. It's because the investors want to know how you think. So if you're 3 years, year one, we've built a prototype, but it won't be ready for a year. And then we're going to beta. for another 9 months. And then we're going to roll it out to a few limited customers. And then year 3, woohoo, I have $5,000 of revenue. Well, that's probably not going to fly. You're going to have to go longer. So think about, where do I go so that I can show that I started and now. And the forecast has to be as long as necessary so that you're showing that growth. Because that's what's going to motivate and make sense? Yes.
If my product takes like a longer thing, should I keep going until, let's say it takes 5 years? It's a very complex machine learning based model.
Yes.
That will take a lot of time. And
Yes.
that's question number 1.
Yes.
Question number 2 is, should this be conservative? Because a lot of like accounting principles show like
We
a
will get to
conservative.
that very shortly. So, and the answer to the second question is yes and no. So, but I will have a chart shortly that will answer that. But yes, in your development years, you're going to show your run rate, or if it's just you, sorry, they don't care. You know, it's like, oh, he's free, he's the founder. But if you're having to go out and hire, outside people to help you build your tech, then yeah, you're going to include the development years, because you're going to have to include startup costs. And if you expect those to be funded by your investor, if you got your friends and family to pony up the money, then you footnote it and say, well, we've already raised $100,000, and our raise for you, Mr. Investor and Miss Investor, is this much money. But you don't necessarily have to show it on your forecast because it's already been raised and it's already been spent. Okay. So again, you are going to want to understand the detail. And this is a model where you're showing a lot of different distribution channels for your product and a lot of different prices. And I have it by quarter because if I did it by month, it wouldn't have fit on the slide. But the reality is if you're doing a 3-year model, you're doing a 36-month model. And what you will show is on the bottom, but what you will have, and you will be able to is all of the detail. Because remember that if you're just showing year end, but you have big payment or a big cash shortfall that's happening in June, then something else happens in October that brings your cash back up. Well, your year-end number is going to partially wash those two out. And you as a founder need to be able to understand what is my lowest level that I need to finance or my maximum need. Okay, so you are going to have a 36 to 48 to guy's going to have a 60-month model, and you're going to understand how that works. And there were only 2 of you who raised your hand here about finance and accounting. So the good news is that it's not really as hard as it looks. The bad news is that your investor is going to want every single founder to really understand every single number. You have to understand your numbers. You have to be able to talk about them. You have to be able to work them inside out, sideways, and you have to be able to understand, well, if my direct to customer is $10.99, but my grocery is $5.99, but Costco just came in and they are just beating me on the head and it's going to be $4.99. You need to be able to plug that into your model, and you need to already understand what that's going to do to your bottom line and what that's going to do to your cash flow. So as founders, I'm not saying you have to build the spreadsheet yourself, although it will help you understand, because also if you use someone else's spreadsheet, it'll make your head explode. So, but you do have to understand your model, and you have to understand your financials. So remember, the investors, people always ask, do you bet on the horse? Do you bet on the jockey? And it's both. You bet on the product and the concept, and you bet on the team. So you may have a team member who's amazing at tech, and another one who's amazing at marketing. And before you pitch, both of you are going to be amazing at the numbers because that's what investors expect. And nobody but the founders will understand the product or their customer. Okay, so I explained, yeah.
One question. This might be so. I'm referring to the top-down versus bottom-up approach. So I was reading one of the VC's recommendations in terms of what he would want the founder to pitch, and he said he would prefer a bottom-up approach because a top-down seems very superficial and those numbers don't make a lot of sense to him. So, in your experience, is it based on the VC's philosophy? What do they generally prefer, or is it very contextual in the sense that for this startup, this model makes sense? How would you go about deciding which one to pick and when?
Okay, great question. And yes, what an investor wants to see is a bottoms-up approach, but he also wants to know how big is your market. So we saw a pitch, and we probably see this Women Founders Network. You can imagine we work with women founders, and so some of the products are more sort of women-centric. And every couple of years we see I'm a new mom, I had a newborn, I flipped out because I didn't have a point, whatever it was, and that would have solved my problem. And we thought, well, how many babies are being born in the United States? Because all I'm hearing is birth rates are down. And it was something like 3.5 million. I mean, the number's pretty low, right? So your investor doesn't necessarily want you to use your market to forecast your revenue, but they want to know that your market's big. So if you're only having 300 babies or 3 million babies, and I could be wrong about that number, it might be 4, whatever. It's not a huge number in the United States. And not all of them are going to be firstborns, right? Some of them are going to be the second kid. And if any of you are the second or third child in your family, you know there's no photos. Mom's got it. She's like, I'm not measuring the food and taking the temperature. So all of a sudden, the number felt kind of small. So in your market slide, you want to show that it's a big market and it's growing and it can survive and appreciate a new entrant, right? It's not about using that necessarily. The old, I just need 0.001% of that market. If that doesn't turn off your investor, nothing will. So they will sit politely or they will roll their eyes, one of the two, but they want to know that the market's big. And they want to know what your SOM is because they want to see how you think and they want to see that you really have thought about who your customer is and why your product is resonating with a relatively large number of people. But then, yes, you go to your bottoms up. How am I going to get the people? How am I going to reach out to them? I'm going to convert that to an order. Okay. So once you get revenues, behind those revenues numbers is some sort of volume number, right? It might be units, it might be subscribers, it might be users. But as that volume grows, a lot of that will drive your costs. So I'm going to spend more time on revenues than on the cost side of it because the cost side of it, frankly, is somewhat easier, right? So if you look at this black t-shirt, my cost is probably, $1.50. And then, I have to have it shipped in from someplace. So, I'm up to $2. Now you can know where I shop if you figure that one out. And then it's pretty easy. If I look at the cost of a physical item, that's pretty straightforward. What the cost is to manufacture or produce that physical item. On the tech side, it's, a little bit different but your volume of users and your volume of subscribers is still going to drive your cost structure, right? Because if you only have 100 people using your app or your software, you can get away with not a whole lot of expensive boxes in the back of your apartment. Once you get up to 100,000 users, all of a sudden you might need, an air-conditioned data room and some expensive toys to manage that bandwidth. So think in terms of at what points, if you're going down the tech route, at what points do my volume force me with a product? Your volume and your costs kind of gradually go up like this. With tech, it might be more lumpy. It might be more stepped, right? Because my platform can currently support X number of users. And until I get to X, I don't have to really do the upgrades. But once I get to X, then I got to spend a big chunk of money. So think about what drives your costs in terms of physical assets or physical, and then also think about staff. Because when you're small and you have, 500 customers, you and your co-founder are doing everything. And you're not sleeping, you're working 24/7, but you got it. And then once you get to a certain size, you're going to have a lot more bodies, supporting those customers. And if it's tech, maybe it's just customer service or biz dev or people that are explaining the product to the customer and explaining why it does what it does. The other thing to understand, which investors will be very, very interested in, is your margins. So, and for the most part, I'm talking about gross margin. So your revenues, your costs that are directly related to the product, A minus B equals C, and C divided into is your gross margin percentage divided into revenues, right? And again, when you're in tech, that could be sort of lumpy. But in any type of business, well, okay, I can't say in every business, but in most businesses, you're going to be able to scale, and you're going to, as you grow in the number of units that you are providing, the cost per unit should be coming down. That's not true in every single business, but as a rule of thumb, it kind of is. The first 10 prototypes are going to be your most expensive versus the next, 5,000. So think about, where do I get my ability to scale, and what does that look like? That your investor is going to be very interested in. And then again, with the customer acquisition cost, think as you move up, once you have a customer, they don't get to be a new customer more than once, right? So once you have all these new customers, then you got to go more new. You got to go out and spend more money to get those more new customers. Think about your customer acquisition costs and your marketing spend, and don't present a plan where in year 3 you have 100,000 customers and you're still spending, $10,000 on marketing, because it's all on the website, or what. It doesn't work that way. So be cognizant of that. One way to think about costs is, if there is a business out there that is similar, then think about what is similar and what can you find online. If they're publicly traded, they have to file documents, and their P&L, their balance sheet, and their cash flow. They will try to disguise it. I won't lie to you, but you can usually get some metrics and some ideas of how they are spending. If nothing else, at least you can get the line items, right? Oh, shoot, I forgot to put in legal. Oh, shoot, I forgot to put in product development. If you can get, and maybe even if accounting is not your background, then maybe pull some financial statements, simple financial statements, and see what are the line items and go, oh, yeah, I got to do that. Or nope, that's not me. So think about the line items that would be included. So this is a forecast that would be likely appropriate in a pitch deck. It is not GAAP. It is not meant to be GAAP. It is meant to show a run rate because the investors are going to want to see how you are burning through cash. Now, as you pointed out, this assumes that your revenues are sort of collected as your customers come in. That's not always the case, right? So if we're manufacturing t-shirts, well, you're thinking, well, what's she talking about? I go online, I pick out that t-shirt. I don't like black. I'm getting it in a much better color. I click, I enter my credit card number, and then a few days later, it arrives. Revenues, expense, they're all matching right up. You forget that this t-shirt had to be ordered probably in some foreign country, I didn't check, and paid for, ordered and paid for 3 to 6 months ago. So your cash, when you expense things or when you are putting out the cash, especially for physical products, is not going to match when your revenues come in. So depending on your industry, you may have a lot of upfront development costs, right? It's going to take you a year and a half or whatever it takes to come up with your prototype. That's cash potentially going out the door. If you have a physical product, instead of your startup costs, you might want to throw in a little line in there called beginning inventory. To launch this product, I'm going to need $100,000 worth of inventory on the shelf because nothing is going to turn off a customer more quickly than them going, ooh, look at that t-shirt, I want it. And they click and it's sold out or currently unavailable. We don't know when it will be back. That's even worse. So as you know, it's really hard to get that customer to come back to the site. So what your forecast is for the purposes of your pitch deck, it's going to kind of reflect your run rate and where you think you are. Now on this one, you see at the top, I included units. And depending on how you structure your deck, it may be subscribers, it may be whatever kind of and maybe you described it. Remember a few slides ago, I had a chart which talked about distribution channels and there were some units on that chart. It doesn't have to be specifically on this, but this has a nice sort of flow to it, right? Because we start at 37,000 units and 280, and you could sort of see how when I step up my units, my revenues go up. And then I also contemplate that my expenses go up. And, I'm moving forward. So this is kind of the high level pitch deck version of it. Now, you've decided that you're going to take a class here at Anderson and you're going to turn that in. Make sure your professor is okay with that. Or you're going to present it in front of your investors and they're very, very sophisticated, but you only have 10 minutes. Any ideas on a workaround? Oh, yeah.
As an appendix?
There you go. You can use an appendix, you said, right? Yeah. So you can say, here's my super fantastic run rate for the next 3 years. And by the way, I have included for your reading pleasure, an appendix at the end, which will give you much further detail on this. That's something that you can leave with your investor or ask your professor, can I put that in the appendix or do you want it in the body of my report? Remember, this is a pitch deck, not a report. A report may actually go into further detail because it's going to be 30 pages long, not 10 slides, 12 slides, however many I have here. So you have to build that backup. So when somebody says, well, wait a minute, I don't even, how do you get 427% growth? You're a founder. You got to be able to talk to that and say, well, what we have found is that through our Facebook ads and through our events and through our this and through our that, we tend to attract 100,000 people every 3 months. And then we keep this many of them, and then we convert this many to orders. So that's how I come up with this growth rate, because we plan to do that in a bigger way, right? So the important thing is that you keep it simple, but that you can dive deep when somebody asks. Okay. Metrics.
I had one quick question. In the previous slide, what's the basis for the growth numbers? Generally, what do you use as the basis? So here the growth seems like phenomenally high. It's at 400%. But generally, do we go with the market growth number, or is it just more of an intuition or a target?
Right. No problem. I included an appendix for you to read at your leisure. Again, this is, we'll get to what you're trying to accomplish with this forecast, but these numbers are sort of made up, right? But yes, you do have to have a background. And if you're going out and saying, I've been bootstrapping for 2 years with only able to spend, $5,000 a year on marketing, but you, Mr. Investor, I'm asking you to invest $1 million in this company, a 400% growth rate is not irrational, right? Because now, instead of spending $5,000 in marketing, maybe of that million, I can spend $200,000. So you are going to expect to go big or go home. That's in this particular model. With your product or your model, then you have to be able to justify whatever percentage growth rate you think is rational and feasible. But if you're going out to raise $1 million, because 5 years from now, if you work really hard with that $1 million, you're going to sort of squeak up to $965,000 in revenue, your investor's going to go, wow, no thanks. So think about a model like this presumes some investment, rapid growth of your company. And you're the one to decide how you're going to make that rapid growth occur. And if you don't have the money as assumption, then the numbers are much smaller. But if you're going in to pitch that you want that money, you want to show the numbers that will result from having raised that money. Not the first year is going to be 10,000 and the second year is going to be 35,000 and the third year is going to be 100. No, I'm going to get the $1 million in the next 90 days, and this is what I can do with it. Make sense?
Just as a follow-up so that I understand what you're communicating to us. If I'm asking for $1 million, if my company is not growing 500% year on year, 400 whatever, my pitch is not good enough. I need to come up with a better value proposition for my customers is what you're saying.
What I'm saying is that if you're asking someone to invest $1 million, they want their money back. They want their $1 million back at some point, and they want some multiple of the $1 million, right? So if I'm putting $1 million in a startup, I'm probably expecting 10x, 20x? I mean, some big number, right? Especially if it's very early stage. So think about your business and your product, and maybe you want to only go out and raise 50, right? So these numbers are not magical. They're just showing that, look, there's a lot of growth here because you, Mr. Investor, are investing in my company, and this is where I can take it. So if you're going to bootstrap your way, fabulous. It's going to take you longer probably, and maybe that's okay. At the end of it, you end up owning the company and you're going to grow 10 or 20% a year or something like that. If you're pitching to an investor, they expect, it's a very high risk investment for them, right? They expect a very high return. You need to show them that you have the vision to get there. Yeah.
Just to clarify the terminology, so I understand the top-down approach.
Mm-hmm.
You have TAM, SAM, SOM. When you say bottom-up approach, is the output the hockey stick graph that you showed in addition to the graph that you just showed?
No. So the bottoms up, the top down approach is saying, I'm going after a really big market and there's room for me as a new competitor in that market because I'm better or whatever. But it's a really big market, so it's not like oh gosh, you guys don't repeat the baby. It's not this really small market where there's already some very strong players and you're probably not going to be able to enter it. The bottoms up approach was the approach on how am I going to get a large number of people to know that me and my product exist. And then how do I advertise and market and bring that to market? And then of that big group, which ones are going to be interested enough to want more information? And then once they get onto my website or my social media link or whatever it is, they're going to end up being an order. So your bottoms up approach is, what is my marketing strategy, advertising strategy to create customers? And then once I get a number of customers, then I multiply that by the price that I'm going to charge per customer, and A times B equals revenues. Okay? You see the difference?
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. So some of the metrics that probably are going to be relevant is customer churn. So you've launched an app and your friends and family, oh, they love you so much, they want to be supportive. And you've emailed, and told every classmate and everybody on the planet that you can think of. And they come in and they're like, oh, look at that. And then a month later, instead of having 10,000 users, you got 5. Because they churned out. They were like, yeah, that was really sweet, but it's not for me. So your churn is how many people come and either buy or try your product, but then disappear and go, it was interesting. I'm glad I spent X dollars, but it's not for me. I'm out of here. As opposed to your retention, which are the people who maybe download your app or buy your product, or, you have a new snack bar, they taste it, they go, wow, love it, mean it. And they turn into either, if they're a subscriber, they stay a subscriber. So you've retained them. That's your retention rate. Or if it's a consumable, they're a repeat customer. They're coming back and they're buying it again. So those are important metrics for you to understand. And they differ a little bit which one's important depending on what type, right? So if they ask about customer churn, it's usually how many of those customers did you get in who like, look at that. And then went, yeah, no, not for me. But retention is, you know what? Once we get a customer onto our platform, 83% of them stay. That's a very high retention. Once I sell them my little super nutritious snack, they come back and they order it again. That's a repeat. That's a retained repeat customer. So that's an important. Customer acquisition, I've already pounded that into your heads. I won't do it again. But they're probably going to want to understand that. And then lifetime value of the customer. Not every business is going to focus on that. Some might focus on average order size. So if you have a variety of packet of products and they go in and your snack bars have 5 different flavors and they keep buying them, what's the LTV of that customer? Or if you have a subscriber, average, you're going to stay for 18 months. Price per month times 18, and then they wash out for whatever reason. That's the average LTV for your customer. So when you're doing research about your market and about your product and who your competitors are, look at what metrics are being used. When you start to get customers, put those measuring tools in place. So if you decided it's think about what you can measure and how you can measure and try to put it in place early. Cash flow, we talked a little bit about that, and how that financial statement was really more of a run rate and was of a, was it included raising capital. Go to your investor and I want $1 million. They probably will say, well, how are you going to spend it? That answer should be right on the tip of your tongue. I'm going to spend this much in marketing and this much in staffing, and then I need to buy this, and then I'm going to do this. And by doing that, I'm going to get from here to here to here. But know in your head, or on appendix, page 3, this is exactly the estimated breakdown of how I'm going to use, how and when I'm going to use that $1 million. So make sure that you have it. Patents, trademarks, and legal. I should just mention that they're not that expensive except for patents, gosh. But trademarks and copyrights are pretty easy. Don't forget product. It has to have a name, right? You have to have gotten the legal name for that. Okay, I'm going to race through these because I'm running out of time. Patty Powell raised $50 million to start a company called RestoreC. She has a really cool story. She's a really cool human being. And she recently put out, I don't know, it was some sort of post or something. And she said, know that your business plan will be wrong. And that the business plan you do a year later will also be wrong. So it's okay. You need to reach for the stars and you need to believe in your product and your plan, but you're not going to get it perfect because it's probably impossible. Investors understand that, they get that. Again, they're looking for how you think. They want to see that, oh, you want a big chunk of my money. I want to know that you're thinking big. I don't want to, oh, yeah, well, it's going to be like a lemonade stand on the corner, in 5 years. They want to see that you have a vision where you can take it. And maybe in 2 years, you're going to expand the product to also include whatever. They want to see how you think. And as I mentioned before, maybe you are really great at tech and your co-founder is really great at marketing, and you will really shine if you also know the numbers. And yeah, they're going to kind of expect you to. Some don'ts. So again, this is not a budget. Don't give them the very conservative estimate because they're not going to go for it. We talked about the hockey stick. They want to see the forecast and they want to see it. And however long it takes you to get there is how long it takes you to get there. So hopefully it's not too long. You'll have to see what your potential is. The longer it takes, the bigger you better grow. They're gonna ask you questions you don't know the answer to. Don't try to wing it. Just say, I'll have to get back to you on that. That is an excellent question. Admit when you don't know something. Admit that you can find it. And if getting in front of investors is challenging, I'm sure you guys have all heard, don't disagree with them. Even if you're right, don't go, oh, well, that's never going to happen. I mean, just respect the advice that they give you. If they tell you have a terrible idea, then you are in the 90% of entrepreneurs who have pitched to investors and have been told their idea is horrible. Okay? It happens. It will happen. And if you ever go on to listen to TED Talks or anything on entrepreneurs, they get shot down far more often than they get approved. So it's okay. Some people are going to hate your idea. And the other reason you should come next Tuesday night at your discounted code to this live event at UCLA is that you will see bullet number 5. The people who are pitching get a 5-minute pitch At 5 minutes and 1 second, their mic goes dead and they have to stop speaking. So when you have the opportunity, whether it's for a class here at UCLA or to pitch in front of investors, practice, practice, practice. Time yourself. I am at 57 minutes for my 1 hour slot. I messed up because I will take questions and we probably have a little bit of time, but I should have stopped, 7, 8 minutes ago. So I'd have at least 10 minutes for questions. But I will tell you that I did time myself earlier in the week to see how long this presentation would take. I will tell you that the women that are presenting on next Tuesday night have done their pitch 25 times. They've had, I don't know where my phone is. They've started the stopwatch on their phone every single time. I know they can stop 10 seconds short. They cannot remember. You might not be in that. You might not be precise. But if you go to an investor meeting and you have 20 minutes and you talk for 19, it's probably not going to go well. So think about what you want to say. Cover your most important concepts. Don't just try to talk faster and jam more stuff into the slides. Think about the message that you want to get across and how much time you have to do that. And have fun, right? They invest in people they like, people who are passionate, people who they think, wow, I'm going to be an investor in this 3-year hockey stick. And maybe in year 5, we'll sell the company. But I'm going to have a relationship with this person for 5 years. I want to like who they are. I want to think they're fun. I want to think, hey, maybe we'll go grab a beer sometime. Okay, I think is that it? Don'ts and the do's? I think that's it for me. Questions? Come on, one. How many of you are entrepreneurs? You have kind of an idea in your head of a company that you want to launch? Cool. Very cool. How many of you are signing up for, I think there's a first year course in entrepreneurial studies, and then there is a second year course as well where they make you do sign up for those.
BCO. Now it's called business creation.
Yeah, I think they changed the name relatively recently, but the second year class is pretty intense. And I can say that because a friend of mine is teaching it this quarter. But it's also pretty fabulous. So I absolutely